In 2022 and 2023, Canada led the entire OECD in terms of total migration, not per capita, absolute numbers. More than Germany, more than the United States. What if I told you that over 75% of all newcomers to Canada actually don't have a pathway to stay? In this video, I'm going to unpack how Canada has become the global leader for temporary migration, how we've set up a system that's two-tier with the promise of permanent residency, but only a very small fraction actually get there. 2022 was a major year for Canada. In my previous video, I mentioned 1.2 million temporary residents entered our borders. Surprisingly, Germany, dealing with the war in Ukraine, came in second. You'd think that there'd be more. France had roughly half our intake, and the United States had lower migration relative to its population size. And let me just remind everyone, Canada is oceans away from conflict around the world, and yet our temporary migration is through the roof. Our temporary migration here in Canada has quadrupled since 2013, and I don't think the government is ever going to slow this down. I do think that there's a misnomer when it comes to immigration here in Canada. We often think of it as economic immigrants coming here to build a life for themselves and their families, to send their kids to schools, to continue the Canadian dream or contribute to the Canadian identity for generations. Certainly that was my perception, and that is exactly my family, my parents' path to come here to Canada and raise myself and our family. That's not the case anymore. Temporary foreign workers are the new norm. The OECD calls this circular rotational migration, short-term, low-wage, and labor-focused. Take, for example, the International Mobility Program here in Canada. Fast forward to just a few years after it was introduced, there's been 400,000 International Mobility Program permit holders, more than double any other country with a similar program. The catch is, for most temporary workers, the permits are closed, they can't switch employers without government approval, and they're tethered to a single job, forcing some high level of dependency. The OECD warns of the risks associated with this, with what they call labor segmentation. Foreigners come to countries, do the jobs, quote, that the citizens don't want to do, but they have fewer rights and fewer protections. Canada, we rank third in the world for taking in international students. The only two countries that beat us are the United States and the United Kingdom. We don't just rely on them as students. We rely on them for low-wage, low-skill jobs in retail, in food, in long-term care. 1 in 5 post-secondary students in Canada is foreign-born, and they're not entering into Canada's top universities like McGill or University of Toronto. They're entering into these private institutions with little to no regulation and oversight, paying higher tuition, working multiple jobs just to stay afloat. Compare that to France, where most international students study at public universities and their work hours are capped. We also have to talk about refugees, because that's been in the news as well. Canada, we resettle more refugees on a per capita basis than any other country in the OECD, 60,000 alone in 2022. That doesn't include the 140,000 Ukrainian migrants who fled Ukraine to Canada after the start of the war. These individuals do get open work and study permits, not the same refugee protection, but it does create a bit of an issue to wonder, what about the non-Ukrainian refugees, like those from Afghanistan, Haiti, the Sudan? Are they extended the same open work study permits that Ukrainian refugees or Ukrainian migrants were and are? But we can't talk about all of this without talking about public services as well. In 2023, Canada's immigration-driven population grew by 3.2%. That may not sound like a lot, but it's more than any other OECD country. And remember, like I said, the CMHC said that our housing needs to keep pace, 3.5 million new homes by 2030, just to keep it at current levels. And the OECD notes that migrants typically settle in 3 or 4 major cities: Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, Calgary, Edmonton. All cities are experiencing a lot of housing inflation that will only continue to rise. Here's also an interesting tidbit. The unemployment rate amongst temporary foreign workers is at historic lows, and for good reason, because they have to be brought here with some sort of labor contract. I didn't know this, and I'm still looking into this. Most temporary foreign workers aren't allowed access to public health care for the first few months after they arrive. Again, if you know more about this, please let me know. I'm looking into it to get more information so that you can understand as well. But like I said, Canada, we're building a parallel society. Just think about this. It's not just Uber drivers and food delivery couriers that are affected. Think about the amount of temporary foreign workers we're allowing in. It's almost every sector you can think of will have temporary foreign workers. That means that school, your kid's school may have temporary foreign workers working at the school system, maybe the teaching assistant, maybe your hospital has temporary foreign workers, the grocery store, every area that you interact with in society will have temporary foreign workers. Those same people won't have access to the social programs you and I enjoy as Canadian citizens, meaning they're living in the same city as you and I, but are leading very different lives and having a very different relationship with social programs, with government, with the sense of civic identity and civic society. Again, economic immigrants are coming hopefully to build, settle roots, have children, and build into the Canadian dream. Temporary foreign workers are literally hoping that they will get pathways to permanent residency right here in Canada. And so the push for them to establish roots is hinged upon attaining permanent residency and nothing else. So if they're only driven by labor and labor above everything else, why would they want to socially cohese? Why would they want to be socially cohesive with you and I? Why would there be a need for civic engagement? I don't believe there's a high level of civic engagement amongst temporary foreign workers. Why would there be? It's not like they have a real right to civic engagement in Canada. And so you have to ask yourself, what type of country is our government building? By 2041, 1 in 3 Canadians will be foreign born, and most newcomers, perhaps even all newcomers, will be temporary. Just think about that. What does that mean about civic engagement? How we relate to newcomers as a society? Our social trust or mistrust or distrust? Do we mistrust people who are only here for permanent residency and just need to work and work and work until they get that? What about speaking English or French, our 2 official languages? Are we okay being this country that has just transient community members coming in for a short period of time and then potentially leaving? Or do we want to build a Canada where people establish roots, set their kids and themselves up for generations to keep building this country forward? It's a heavier investment for the Canadian government, but I always thought that was what our multiculturalism policy was all about. I'd love to know what you think in the comments below. The OECD report on 2024 immigration is out. I'll leave links below. Take a look for yourself. The numbers for Canada are pretty wild.